What's up everyone, it's Mr. NoobTube Gamer. Today we're going to talk about Call of Duty Ghosts in the year 2020. Is the game still alive? Are people still playing? And is it a fun game to play? Because remember, Call of Duty Ghosts was one of the most hated games in Call of Duty history. People hated this game when it came out. And honestly, in my opinion, I don't think it was that bad, but people look at this game as the beginning of the downfall of the Call of Duty series. And you have many people within the community that think that Black Ops 2 was the last good game in the series, and any game that came out after that was just shit. But Call of Duty Ghosts specifically is probably the second most hated game in the series, the first one being Infinite Warfare. But this game is going to focus more on how the game plays today more than what other people thought about it back when it was in its prime. So this video is more geared towards people who maybe are thinking about reinstalling the game. They're looking for a Call of Duty game to play that's not Modern Warfare or Black Ops 4, and they had the game back in the day and they're thinking about reinstalling it. That's for those people and people who may have not have been around back then in 2013 and maybe want to experience the game for themselves and want to pick up the game for the first time in the year 2020. So this video is going to be for those two groups of people who owned the game before, are thinking about reinstalling it, and people who never owned the game before, maybe weren't around back then, or just are curious. The thing about Ghost is your experience will vary based on which platform you are playing your games on. If you're on PC, don't even bother thinking about getting this game if you care about the multiplayer, because it's completely dead at this point. The PC version of most Call of Duty games, especially the older ones, are really dead. Don't even bother with Call of Duty Ghosts if you're on PC. Same thing with the Wii U. That game, I've heard, is really dead on the Wii U version. But if you have a PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, Xbox 360, or Xbox One, you're pretty much good to go. You're going to find a match no matter what. But you're only going to be able to play Team Deathmatch. There's no Domination, Search and Destroy, or other game modes. It's just TDM because the player base is very small. I have the game on Xbox One, and the most players I can find, even at peak times on the weekends, is 600 players, which is not a whole lot of people, but still enough to be able to play. Obviously, regions are going to be another variable. If you live in Asia or Australia, you probably won't find a match, and that goes for pretty much any region outside of North America and Europe. You guys can obviously tell by my accent that I live in North America. I live in the United States. So if you live in another part of the world, your experience is probably going to be pretty different than mine. But I'm on Xbox One, so if you're on the PS4, PS3, or 360, you're going to have more players because the PlayStation 4 sold a lot more than the Xbox One, and more people played Call of Duty Ghosts on the last gen consoles, the PS3 and 360, than they did for the current gen consoles. Remember, Call of Duty Ghosts was a launch title for the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. And back then, a lot of people didn't really have those consoles, the new consoles, when they came out. They were holding on to their PS3s and 360s for a couple more years, which means that Ghosts on the new generation consoles may not be as populated as the other games that came out in more recent years, like Advanced Warfare, Black Ops 3, Infinite Warfare. Those games definitely have more players. But considering how much people hated Call of Duty Ghosts when it came out, and that the game is 7 years old now, I think it's pretty impressive that there are still people out there that play the game. Even if it's only a few hundred people, I think that's still pretty good considering. But there's a little bit of a catch. If you want to play the DLC, it's going to be a bit harder to find a game because a lot of people didn't buy the DLC when Ghost came out and don't own the map packs. The gameplay you're seeing right now is of a DLC map, so it's not like the DLC is completely dead in the game, but it's going to be a lot harder to find a game with the DLC installed. And that's very important to note because the base maps in the game without the DLC are terrible. I mean, there's only two good maps that came with the game, and that would be Strike Zone and Freight. The other maps in the game that came with it suck, and they're among the worst in Call of Duty history. I think that's a big reason why the game was so unpopular. The maps were terrible. But ironically enough, the maps that are included in the DLC are some of the best that the franchise has seen. They actually listened to the community and made maps that were really good, but for a lot of people, that was too little too late. As soon as the DLC started rolling around, many people already moved on from Call of Duty Ghosts to other games, which is a real shame because the DLC maps are fantastic. Most of them are amazing. There's maybe only one or two of them that I don't like, but most of them are some of the best maps that I've ever played. This one's pretty good, but there are other ones that are even better. The point is that if you do not have access to the DLC maps, you're probably not going to have a good time. But the overall gameplay definitely holds up really well. I think the weapons are really good. The fact that you do not have to actually level up to unlock the weapons. You can actually use squad points to unlock a weapon, so they're not locked behind high levels, so you don't have to keep grinding and grinding and grinding. Get the good weapons in the game. You can start getting them at like level 2 or 3. It's pretty cool. So if you're worried about grinding, don't worry. It's actually the easiest game in the series to actually get the weapons, instead of like the good weapons being locked behind level 40, level 50, and having to grind until you get those weapons. I mean, we've all had that experience before, and it's kind of annoying, especially if it's a new game or an old game that you haven't played before and you're low level and you have to keep ranking up to try to even get the full experience. But that's not the case with Ghosts. I think out of all the Call of Duty games, Ghosts is definitely the most friendly towards new players. So you definitely don't have to worry about getting into the game for the first time if you've never played it before, you never owned it before, and you're trying to get it now. Getting started is pretty easy, and you won't have any problems with that. And the weapons are definitely really fun to use, especially the DLC weapons like the Ripper and the Maverick. Those are my 2 favorite weapons in the entire game. I'm using the Maverick in this gameplay. That's a DLC weapon, so again, you don't have the DLCs. You'll be missing out on a lot of content, unfortunately. But overall, the game is really fun to play. The shooting mechanics are really good. It's fairly well balanced except for the IEDs and the IMS and everything's exploding. I mean, you see me shooting noob tubes, I got danger close. So I guess people like me might ruin the game for you. If you're on Xbox One, you're probably going to run into me in a match. I'm sorry, I just have so much fun noob tubing. I'm not going to stop doing it, so if that hurts your feelings, too bad. Oh yeah, the perk system is probably the best that I've ever experienced in any Call of Duty game. The pick 10 system that Treyarch came up with is pretty good, but what they have in Ghosts is even better in my opinion. It's also the first Call of Duty game where you can actually interact with the maps in a meaningful way. If you call into Chem Strike, the whole strike zone map will change because it will blow up, and the whole structure of the entire map will be completely different because you blew it up with a Chem Strike, which is pretty fucking awesome. And there are other maps that also change in the middle of the match, which is really cool and brings a new dynamic to the gameplay. So Call of Duty Ghosts is definitely far from a perfect game. There are definitely a lot of things they did wrong with this entry in the series, but there are also a lot of things that they did really well. And I think Call of Duty Ghosts in a lot of ways definitely did mark the end of an era for the Call of Duty series. It was the last game in the series to not have any supply drops. Every Call of Duty game that came out after Ghosts has some type of supply drops in them, so it makes it even harder to get back into those old games because there are still weapons that you can't get because they're locked behind the supply drops. Ghost doesn't have any, and it was also the last game in the series before they started making advanced movement games like Advanced Warfare, Black Ops 3, and Infinite Warfare. So a lot has definitely changed in the Call of Duty franchise since the release of Ghost, but it definitely still holds up to this day. It's a really fun game to play. I would highly recommend you check it out if you haven't before. At this point, you could get a physical copy for no more than $10, probably even cheaper, like $5, so it's really cheap to get into. But even so, I think, you should definitely check it out, but come in with very low expectations because the game is not nearly as fun without the DLC. The thing about the Season Pass is that it still costs $50 to this day. It never came down in price, so that's obviously a very tough sell for people who never had the game before to buy a $50 Season Pass for a 7-year-old game. I'm sure most people are not going to do that. And that obviously makes it a lot more difficult to recommend because the DLC maps are really what makes the game fun for me at this point. But because the regular game is cheap enough these days, I'd say there's really no harm in trying it out if you haven't played it before. Especially since the campaign was really good and it's probably one of my favorite campaigns in Call of Duty history. So you'll probably get your money's worth no matter what, but if you can access the DLC maps, I'd highly recommend that you do, because they make the game so much better to enjoy. But overall, Call of Duty Ghost is a pretty solid gaming experience, even to this day. People are still playing it, it's still alive. It might be on life support, but it's still alive. So if you haven't played it before, I think it's definitely worth checking out, and if you already have it, it can't hurt to reinstall and check it out again. If you get the game on Xbox One, you could add my gamer tag, Mr. NoobTube Gamer, and we could play a few matches together. But anyway, that wraps up today's video. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you all later. Bye.